Once we have Jews who are emancipated, it's very mysterious how all of a sudden this topic of converting the Jews disappears. Being a Jew is naturalized. It becomes part of their nature, which is why, incidentally, even with Wagner, this motive of Fliegende Holländer, Flying Dutchman and so on, the figure of eternal Jew comes to forward. The idea is that being a Jew is no longer just a question of religion, but a question of your very nature, where then, of course, the only solution is annihilation. So it's a nice paradox how this violent anti-Semitism is the result of the 19th century. So let me go on. Where are we today? I claim, now comes the crazy theory, which is again battle-tested in Israel, but Zionists shouted at me. Now will come more my pro-Arab side forwards. So if the two guys who left were wanted to dismiss me as Zionists, now I will turn it around. I claim that today we invented a new form of anti-Semitism, Zionist anti-Semitism. In what sense? You know what shocked me and gave me this idea? When I was in Israel, I was there with some anti-Zionists, that is to say, my Jewish friends, critical of the politics of the state of Israel. And they were ferociously attacked by some radical Zionists. What shocked me so much is that the way Zionists attacked them was in exactly the same terms, the same intellectual frame that towards the end of 19th century, European nation-state nationalists were attacking their Jews. What was that? For example, my good friend who did a wonderful film about Palestinian-Israeli relationship, the film is called Forgiveness, his name is Udi Aloni. He was attacked as the one who only pretends to be one of us, a Jew, but it's really cosmopolitic, without roots, just freely floating around, selling himself around the world and caring only for money. And I was shocked. I wait a minute, here, you Jews also have your own Jew, how should I put it, no? You know, because this was, as you probably know, the basic matrix for this nationalistic nation-state anti-Semitism, how you portray the Jew. The problem of Jew was, what's his fidelity? Is it he like us, really rooted in our nation, or is he free-floating, cosmopolitan, and so on and so on? So, I was shocked at how we literally are getting today, constructed by Zionism, how should I put it, Jews who are the Jews for Jews themselves. And because this is a problem. The problem is that the moment we have the state of Israel, this fundamental ambiguity of the Jewish identity, on the one hand, this rejecting any particular identity. Your identity is religion, you have this, you reject the form of the state, but now you have a state. Then you have, of course, the tension between this universalized aspect of being a Jew. Jews were always the greatest advocates of what Kant called, Immanuel Kant, the public use of reason. The use of reason which is not limited by any private corporation, not even state, just general, like free-floating thinking, which is, of course, the source of all free thought, and so on and so on. And, of course, then, this gets even more tense when you have Jews themselves constructing those who don't accept Zionist project of the state form of Israel as being, again, the ultimate form of anti-Semitism. And this also, to be a little bit more vicious, explains a fact which I think is very mysterious for me. You know, my dogma is that in United States, you know, these conservative biblical fundamentalists like Pat Buchanan, no, even more Pat Robertson and so on, traditionally they were always the staunchest anti-Semites in United States. Some 15, 20 years ago, they all turned extremely pro-Zionist. Like, this was an enigma for me. How can it be that the very people whose very nature, as it were, is to be anti-Semitic, they're now the most philo-Semitic? And my solution is a totally crazy one. It's because they found their own proper ally. Because the those who are unconditionally pro-state of Israel Zionists, they are already in a way anti-Semitic. So it's not that American fundamentalists change. How are they anti-Semitic? You know what is the standard Zionist argument when you criticize the state of Israel? They claim that, of course, state of Israel can be criticized like every other state, but they claim you shouldn't misuse this justified critique of the Israel politics for anti-Semitic purposes. So they claim that whenever you criticize Israel, really you are already anti-Semitic. What these Christian fundamentalist supporters of Israeli politics do by rejecting leftist critiques of the Israeli politics is best rendered by a wonderful joke I read around a year ago in Die Presse, a daily newspaper in Austria, Vienna, a wonderful caricature which shows two fat Nazi-looking Austrians reading a newspaper together, and one of them shows in the newspaper an article and says to his friend, "Here you can see again how a totally justified anti-Semitism is brutally misused for a cheap critique of the state of Israel." No, it's the other way around. That's, I think, the logic of American anti-Semites. You know, like us anti-Semites, paradoxically, they support the state of Israel, which, incidentally, if you think I'm crazy, wouldn't even be so foreign to Hitler. Let's not forget that, and this is what I try to explain to my friends who don't agree usually with me, that as much as we can be and should be critical towards Arabs who really can be, are, or come dangerously close to anti-Semitism, there is nonetheless one difference, and you cannot get over it, that for the Nazis, the fundamental problem was not a Jew who wants his state, but was a Jew who is freely floating around. As such, they are invisible, they are everywhere, you cannot recognize them. You know that for some time, Hitler even played with the idea of giving to the Jews a state. We know all these stupid stories, Madagascar and so on, no? But there was even an idea of Palestine, if they were to occupy Palestine and so on. This is a very curious story. I report it in one of my books, and I'm not blaming the Jews here. I'm just demonstrating to you the tendency of Hitler. You know, for example, that Adolf Eichmann, that guy, the Eichmann, wanted to visit, because of some railway strike, they had to visit Alexandria, wanted to visit Palestine. Then he met with Haganah representatives in Alexandria, and basically they made a deal in 38 or 39, just before the war. The deal was that if Jews from Germany promise that they will not stay in Europe, but that they will go to Palestine, they are allowed to take half or even more, I don't know, of their money, if they are rich, with them, on condition that they buy products for it from German industry. So the crazy paradox is that much of the, not only agricultural equipment, but even some small arms, which Israel used then in the war for independence, some small amount of them was German production bought. I'm not blaming the Jews here. I would have done the same to avoid the misunderstanding. What I only wanted to show is that for the Nazis, the problem was this invisible, all-present, free-floating Jews. For the Arabs today, the problem is exactly the opposite. They hate the Jews who want a state. They are not, and I don't agree with people who claim, no, this is just a name for they really want to kill them all. It's not as simple as that. The figure of the Jew is for them not a traditional Jew who wanders around, but a Jew who wants land. A Jew who wants to no longer be a wandering Jew, but wants land, and so on and so on. So, the last note about Israel. You know, when you have a friend who tells you something, even some of Israeli friends are telling me, a friend who tells you, listen, okay, I support Arabs and so on, but nonetheless, Hamas now nonetheless started to fire rockets from Gaza. What can the state of Israel do but defend itself? There is undoubtedly a moment of truth in it. I mean, I understand here Israel, but this is for me secondary. You know, the big problem is the following one, and when you pass a judgment on Middle East crisis, so-called, bear in mind this always. It's interesting how little we learn in our media, not about what goes on when something goes on, in the sense when events are coming, war demonstrations, killings, and so on. But, how to put it cynically, what goes on when nothing goes on? What goes on is something very sad, and that's what you should visit. If you go to Israel, for example, go across, go to West Bank, and not big politicians. Look at the everyday life of Palestinians, and you will discover, let's call it truly Kafkaesque, bureaucratic terror. How, for example, the land is parceled, when Israel builds settlements, they build a special highway where Palestinians are not allowed to, and how especially the area around Jerusalem, to cut a long story short, they are slowly suffocating the West Bank. I think that maybe, and again, it's not this kind of a terror, you know, burning, killing, although that is also